Leslie Hall Pinder, lawyer, activist, and writer, has a new novel, Bring Me One of Everything, which will be published shortly by Grace Swan. It is a gripping tale. In 1957,
a brilliant young anthropologist, Austin Hart, leads a voyage to a remote island in northern Canada. His task is to preserve the largest remaining stand of totem poles in the world. These are the artistic remains of the Haida Nation, which was thought to be a decimated native society. He orders the expedition to hack down the Weeping Woman pole, which is a mortuary pole holding a coffin at the top. 7 years later, having achieved international acclaim, Austin Hart, in his office, amid the very totems that he salvaged, calls the police, puts the barrel of a rifle into his mouth, and pulls the trigger. As a result of a number of seemingly coincidental events, Alicia Purcell begins the precipitous journey to try and understand and to solve the mystery of Austin Hart's suicide.
I'm delighted to have a chance to talk with Leslie Hall Pinder today. Leslie, this is a dazzling novel, and I am not alone in thinking this. I have an advanced review copy here where the well-known author Hugh Brody says you tell this story with elegance, wit, and extraordinary intelligence, that it's a tour de force, a work of rare depth and brilliance. James Elkins of Western Virginia University says she's a novelist who fishes in deep water, and we can do nothing less than marvel at what she's able to catch. I agree. Central to the plot of this story are a number of native artifacts. How much creative liberty did you take when relating the native aspects of this story?
Well, there are a lot of artifacts that are play a part in the book, mainly because Austin Hart, the man that ultimately killed himself, he was a collector. And so I studied a lot about the raven rattles and the totem poles, of course, but really central in the book are these twin masks. And Austin Hart was absolutely bedazzled by them, and they are bedazzling, but he also became obsessed by them because they're very mysterious. They're twin masks, and one is sighted and the other is blind. And not that long ago, it was proposed that the unsighted mask was worn by the dancer on the outside. So it's completely counterintuitive, and these masks were danced in these mystical ritual performances in northern BC, the Haida and the Tsimshian. And so, to answer your question, I was completely as true as I could possibly be to the owners of these artifacts and their history. But the characters, I put imaginary characters into some of these real events.
If much of this story is woven around real facts and real history, what reactions to the book do you expect from the Aboriginal people who see the ownership of story and storytelling as a legal right?
Well, that's an important question. It's an important question in the book itself, because the characters grapple with a lot of the moral issues around telling stories that sometimes aren't your own. I'm not in this book in any sense appropriating native stories and telling them as if they were my own. But the characters struggle with this because there is a lot of theft that is considered in the book. And the theft is not just of objects, but it is also of more ephemeral things like stories. And it's a central question in the book. The initiating event in the novel is the taking of these poles in 1957 in this expedition. And Austin Hart ends up as a character walking a moral fault line, and his compass is off, and he makes decisions which are off. And in fact, at one point, he says that he uses the metaphor that it was as though he came across a burning house and decided to save the things that were in the house, the artifacts, rather than the people. And that's a huge condemnatory feeling and a strange choice.
In the story, the main character, Alicia, is a woman who struggles with depression, struggles with bad relationship with her mother. So now, is this something also you've had personal experience with?
Well, I don't think she really suffers from depression. She, if anything, it is repression. She is, in the beginning of the book, she's really closed down. She's cut off emotionally, so much so that she actually sees the color drain from her world, and it scares her. And I know something of what it's like to live in your brain, to be cut off from the richness of an emotional life. So I do know that part of it.
And what about Alicia's mother, Sophia?
Well, Alicia's mother is, in the beginning, she's a cranky old woman. She's very witty, she's very stylish, but she's quite a bitch, and she has a terrible relationship. There's a terrible relationship between Alex and her mother. And in the end, the two of them both are changed. Sophia has, in some sense, been taken on this journey unwittingly by her daughter. And in the end, she is somebody who finally has the capacity to love.
Listen, reading this book was not difficult, but as I'm kind of in retrospect looking over the story, it feels quite intricate. So several stories, they're layered, they're intertwined, they're interwoven with each other. Can you tell us something about how you managed to develop such an intricate plot?
Well, in the beginning, I really thought the story was about Austin Hart, that he was the centerpiece, and he is, of course, critical. And there was Alicia, who wanted to find why he did this, despite the advice from a lot of people. Two friends of mine read the first draft of the book, and they both said separately, "We don't know why Alicia does anything." And I thought, it's easy to solve. You want to know why somebody does something, you meet their mother. And Sophia wasn't a character in the book in the beginning at all, in the first draft, but I wrote her in, I created her and wrote her in, and gradually the whole force of the novel started to shift, and it became really about these two people and their struggle to realize themselves. So a lot of writers say this, that you really have to follow the lead of your characters. As the story was seen, as I took up the perspective of these different characters, then the question of whether he was a hero or a thief, whether what he did was right or wrong, really changed depending on who was asking the question and who was answering it.
20 years ago, your first novel, Under the House, was published by the leading literary houses in Britain and in the US and in Canada. So it was met, I know, with critical acclaim. The New York Times, the London Times, Publishers Weekly, just name a few. Margaret Atwood, I believe, said it was a haunting novel by a writer of great talent and sensitivity. So now you have another book being launched by Grey Swan Press. Why the delay between the novels?
You know, ever since I was a little girl, I imagined that I would become a writer, that would be my profession. And I think sometimes that I accidentally became a lawyer. Lawyers might say I was negligent. But I ended up having really two professions, two big loves. I was practicing law and I was writing. And I was able to manage both of these fairly well for a while. I wrote Under the House during my lunch hours, and it took about a year. And then it was finished, and I remember getting a call one morning before I went to the office from this man was on the phone, and he had a very plummy voice, and he said, "Leslie, I just want to tell you how much I loved your novel." And he was a literary agent calling from London, and he ended up being my agent, and the book did well. It was published in 3 countries, and film rights were optioned, although never made. And then I managed to, over the next 3 or 4 years, write another book on double tracks, which was nominated for the highest literary award in Canada, which was great. And then it just got a bit harder, and I had worked in a big firm, and then I started my own firm with 2 other lawyers, and we were doing native land claims work. And it was the work was completely absorbing and demanding, and it eventually took up all of my time.
How did you manage?
Not so well. Because we were doing these amazing cases, it was at a time when the governments in Canada denied that that the natives had any right to their land at all. So there was a massive void, and you know, we were asked by the native people to act for them, and you eventually learn what happened to native people in a history which really seems buried. And once you learn what happened, you know, the devastation of the people, even the murder of many native people, you want to fix it. You want to do something. And I guess I was naive enough to believe that, you know, I just had to find the right law, or we had to create new law, and amends would be made. But it took and that did happen in some way, but it took a long time, and although it required I think a tremendous amount of creativity, a kind of writer's creativity in the law, the writing was suffering.
Finding time to write was difficult. Now you're writing full-time. Has it been difficult to quit the law?
Well, you know, it really was difficult, because whole native communities were telling us their stories, and we had to know those stories in order to figure out how to advance their rights. And it's an important point in the book, because one of the characters says, you know, if somebody tells you their secrets, hoping that and trusting that you're going to figure out a way to help them, and you don't, their stories go unspoken and unsaid. And as Austin Hart did, he just quit. He left the scene. He disappeared, and he was a kind of thief. And I didn't want to be a thief. At the same time, I remember very clearly waking up one morning and saying to myself, you know, there are other people here who can do this work. And I felt I needed to return to my first love, which was writing. But in the writing, I used the law, the courtroom, the legal stuff I learned. So there was a marriage.
So you kind of had to reinvent yourself.
Well, it felt more like redeploying myself. The task was to try to use the capacity I had developed in the law to put that into the work that I wanted to do as a writer, and to have mature in that writing the issues that I'd felt in the law, which were about themes of belonging and illegitimacy, of having a voice and feeling extinguished. I think my books are about trying to break out of old forms and to recreate in a new place yourself. And I think all of us struggle for that. You know, women who feel like they've put their lives on hold in order to raise children, men doing the same. You know, the dreams seem to go away, and we're all seekers. We're seekers to just go beyond these received limitations, to kind of burst into a scene and reinvigorate it, and to find a new place for the experiences that you've had. In one of the characters says, you know, we demand so little and we are offered so much. And I think the task is to take what's on offer.